Greetings. I am Dariel, inventor of Daoist Druidry. Now that may sound a little bit like self-elevation, and in a way it certainly is. But shall we say I am like a cook? Of course the ingredients I am using are all known. There is no new ingredient which I have found. But like a cook may use all the known ingredients known for centuries or millennia and may invent a new recipe, so claim I. It may, however, be that someone else invented something similar or even identical, but then I do not know about it. It is also not very relevant. I have written a few papers about this idea, and it is not something that I was seeking. It is more, shall we say, a reaction to both a spiritual and a worldly crisis. To the crisis of our current world, I will not lose much words. If you have the patience to listen to me, it will be known in some way or another to you anyway. But it has become my distinct opinion that the answer to our crises, both in the world at large and in our life, the answers are not found outside of ourselves, but inside. For if we look at the history, the larger picture, like a template to orient ourselves along, we can see that all the dreadful developments of human history all have the same source, that the way humans are inside has not changed. So people and humanity at large have, in the last few centuries especially, spent considerable effort to change the outer situation, like the political, the economic, and inventing new machines and all this. And while this is all great and fine, the problem is our inner self, our interior workings have not changed. So no matter what political system we create, what economical system we fabricate or whatever, it's all there is. Oh, of course there are some that are better than others, it's no doubt. But humanity needs to make what I call a spiritual leap ahead. That is the one first and foremost task to humanity altogether. Though I am beyond the idea to teach a humanity or such a large corpus of beings. And interestingly enough, for more than 35 years I walk on a spiritual path, there are essentially three states of being. At first you are a learner, a pupil, and second, when you've learned enough, though you always continue learning, you become a teacher and you teach things which you have learned. But what few are aware of, there is a third level, if you wish. That is when you give up teaching altogether. Inasmuch I am not teaching you something, I'm just telling you what I do and what I did. And you may do it the same way or in a different way or not at all. And you may pick out elements of it and integrate it. I'm not teaching you a system, though I have one for myself. I cannot say whether it is one. And that is part of the system, so to speak, so it's a little bit like a paradox. I don't want to bother you in this first lesson with too much theory. Maybe I put theory as far as it is necessary in it, and will come with a grander theory in some of the later lessons. The point that you may have approached and that maybe persuades you to listen to what I have to say about this is that you've walked through life both as a mundane, mortal, average person like we all are most of the time, and come to realize that there is no anchor where you rest in. In a world where the outer world is instability, people usually do not realize that they have no anchor in themselves because the world around them is at peace and harmony, and they have not much need for an anchor inside of themselves because the outside world offers them instead. But which happens in tidal waves frequently and always will, the society is, I shall not say collapse, but shall we say lose a considerable amount of stability, of orientation and security on the outside world, then people suddenly realized, I have no anchor inside of me. Or no, let's go a step back. They just realize I have no anchor. They feel like floating in a sphere of chaos, like being pushed around like a boat on a vast ocean, to the left, to the right, hither and thither, and there is no steering power. And the sea becoming foggy and dark, don't even know where they would wish to go. Or one day they want this, and another day they want another thing. Meaning, you are not centered in yourself, and you have no anchor that holds you. It is unfortunate that both in personal development as well as in development of human society, the question of what is there beyond, when the material anchors and safeties break, or when you come to a personal existential crisis out of pure personal reasons, that people do that what people in Western Europe would call search for God. Now it's a little bit a pompous word, and we shall start with smaller. So I say that people, when something in their life breaks apart and they do not feel any anchor holding them, only then that they start to think, oh, where is an anchor that grounds me, that holds me in all this chaos and unending being driven by forces beyond my control. This anxiety coming from what is to be called chaos. For chaos means that suddenly all the things around you are largely out of your control, and you have no idea where things will develop, what to expect from the next day, the next month, the next year. You are even uncertain to a degree maybe what you truly want. You question what you did, and you are in a situation of feeling lost. It would be ideal if people start searching for the anchor in themselves before there is a crisis, for it is much easier to learn a spiritual grounding when you are not troubled with a million troubles, either through something that your personal life is falling apart, or that society around you is falling apart. But unfortunately in human history we have seen that rarely. Still, it is no reason to chastise yourselves, because thinking in such a negative way of yourself is not a helpful thing. When you come to a point that you find out that you personally made an error, it is of course important to say, and to realize, oh, I made an error, whatever it may be. But there is no point in dwelling on it, on letting that feeling overcome you, for that makes you passive and makes you feeling like you're powerless and you drift even more than before. No, you must take this crisis as a sign to say there is something to learn, whatever it may be. And the first thing that I tell you is there is no reliable anchor in the outside. Not in a government, not in friends, not even in a relationship or a marriage, for the woman or man of your dreams may someday decide to leave you for whatever reason. Nothing in the outer world is stable and reliable. That's not to say that these things are bad. But all worldly exterior things are people, are transient, passing, changing. The person who becomes your friend today changes every day. There is the saying of Heraclitus that a man cannot step in the same river twice, for there is never the same river and there is never the same man. So, you cannot meet the same person ever again. For the person you meet tomorrow has already changed, even if it was just a tiny bit. So there is no stability outside. And if you seek an anchor, the only place you can find it is inside yourself. That is the first thing that you have to understand. That is not that friendships are bad or needless, or that I criticize them, or love, or states, or governments, or all this. No, on the contrary, these are all very important. But you must be aware they are always changing. They never remain. So it is always a muddling through that is life from day to day. And let's lead us to the second realization. The only point of time that is relevant is now. It is not yesterday, it is not tomorrow, it is now. Now I know this sounds like a really bad cliche because so many wannabe spiritual people have said so. But it is true. And it is extremely important to understand. Now let me make something very clear, because people who hear about spirituality from other people, there is no such thing as a constant state of enlightenment. It doesn't exist. That is what many gurus teach you, what many esoteric groups teach you. They promise you an enlightenment in a state that is unchanging enlightenment. That does not exist. Not in this world. This world is a world of constant change. And no matter how wise you become, I cannot honestly promise you that however enlightened you may become, you will always be harmonic, in balance, without flaw, without trouble, without agitation. That is not what I promise you, because that is not what is possible. What is possible, however, is that you create an anchor inside yourself, that when you are distraught, troubled, by personal or outside greater things troubling you, that you create mechanisms which consciously allow you to go back to your anchor, to ground yourself again in your inside, that it becomes more likely, like an automatism that you train. For instance, if you train martial arts, the art of self-defense, at first you learn certain movements like in Kung Fu, Karate, whatever it is, and you do them consciously. And that is what the beginner does. But if you master these moves of self-defense, you can do them without thinking. Like a very good martial artist, like a kung fu fighter, when attacked, he will not consciously process, oh, the fist is coming from here, or he has a knife, or whatever. He has trained so much, that is what makes him a master, that there is an automatism in his reactions that is imbued in his memory because of regular practice. And the mind can be trained just as in the same way. That you can train yourself certain set of mind, and it is not that it always with a snap of your fingers is present, but the more you train these inner workings, shall we say, or what the Chinese call cultivation. I really like this word. What I teach is cultivation, in a sense. The cultivation of your inner energies. And your harmonization with the energies that surround you. That is what I teach. Basically, in a very simplified way. And now, of course, there are many currents, destructive currents or undesired, which may not be destructive, but not what you want. And harmonic currents, which support you, harmonize you, give you inner peace. And like a man training martial arts, first does these body reactions consciously, and then he can do them without really thinking much of them. They just appear like in a flow. So if you train certain exercises, shall we say, regularly, they become part of an automatism that the more you train them, the more likely you are to quicker snap out of a bad mindset. Like when you're sad, depressed, distraught, frightened, angry, irritated, whatever it is. If you train mindsets that harmonize you with the inner forces and your inner forces with the flow of the outer forces, the harmonic ones, and learn to let go of the disharmonic currents, both inside and outside, it makes it more likely that it's no guarantee that you will never be depressed, distraught, or afraid, or whatever. That is something that no person can guarantee you, because that is not the way of the world. Because that would mean a stagnation in the spiritual, and that is not the way of the world. It just makes it more likely and easier to snap back into this mindset. That is one of the main aims of what I create. It is still in the process of creation. I just emphasize it. It's not already complete work. Now, of course, if you are a materialist person or an atheist and do not believe in forces, energies, you can do these exercises just the same, I believe. Because the only thing that is important, that doing certain things creates certain results. Like if you do certain exercises as if, like pretending, they create a certain state of mind. And it is not relevant whether there are really energies, which I will describe, and deities and guardians of elements, of which I will speak. It's not if you learn, like for instance, if you learn to connect yourself with the energy of a tree and feel what he feels, and maybe even communicate with the spirit of a tree, it is not relevant whether this tree has a spirit or not, whether this is all a fabrication of your physical brain or real. The only thing that matters is you do a certain thing and it creates a certain result which may be desirable. The reality of it is absolutely irrelevant. You just have to believe. not believe in the thing in the way like it is so often misused in Western religion. Like, I give you a book or a list of things and you subscribe to it. Like, okay, you told me it is written in this holy book, and so blindly I have to assume it is so. No. The belief which I talk of is something grounded in trying something out and letting something happen. It is more a letting go. Something, if you want something more feminine, like you open yourself to be penetrated by powers, by forces, by events. Things come over you. It is more like Lao. I'm quite oriented towards Lao Tse, one of the great masters of Daoism, who described that the way of the Tao is the feminine way, the way of the water, because it's the way of opening yourselves. That is why I've often described my doing also as shamanism. These are all placeholder words for something that has no real word, no term. But shamanism is an easy way to say, okay, I do certain practices, putting myself in a trance, for instance, or in an altered state of mind, but it is basically that I'm opening up myself for energies which are desired, and let those flow away which are undesired. It's not so much an active confrontational thing, like a wanting. It's a walking. And even more, the idea that you want to be somewhere, to have a goal where you want to be, is probably one of the biggest hindrances of spiritual progress on this path which I'm speaking about. Like, it's a little bit like if you fall in love with someone. The more willful you want the other person to love you back, the more likely it is that you ruin it. Because the other person, if you approach her or him, will realize your desperation. And that is something that almost every person is driving away when someone is desperately wishing you to be loved. So do not be desperately seeking result. I know that when I tell you letting go of result, the lust of result entirely, it's a lofty, faraway goal. But it is still a mindset that I want you to keep in the background of your memory. It is a doing, not a wanting to be somewhere. It is also a being something. And that also is very important. One of the great hurdles of having breakthroughs on a spiritual path is that you do not see yourself as a spiritual person in the role. Now, we all have roles we fall into, and automatically we have a reaction system in which we walk. For instance, if you are the husband and the supporter of a family, of your wife and your 3 children, take for example, and you come home to your wife and your children, you have the role of the husband to your wife, of the father to your children, and you have a different role in the company you are employed in relation to your boss, your superior. Or if you are the boss, you have a different role and relation and self-identity as the boss towards your employees. So you have certain identities of me. You are the leader of a company, or you are the author of books, or whatever it is you do as a profession. You have a professional identity and you slip into it, and when you enter the company you work in, you function like that. You snap into a role, and all the mechanisms of, like if you're a teacher in a public school, you do not talk to your colleagues and the pupils in your school in the same way that you talk to your wife or if you are a woman to your husband, or whatever. It's just an example. I'm not discriminating genders roles. It's just to make just one simple example. So you do not react to your pupils and your fellow teachers in the way yet you talk to your wife. And ideally, you do not talk to your little children in the same way you talk to your wife. You have roles, you have identities of a father, of a mother, of a teacher, of a bricklayer, or whatever it is you do. And you have a set of which are ingrained as normality, which make an identity. And you can say, I am this and this and this. I'm a father, I am, I don't know, straight or gay, I am an IT practitioner, or I'm a gardener, or whatever it is. And then, of course, hobbies. I am a painter, a musician, or anything that is part of your identity. You think, okay, I am this. And to become a spiritual person, you must think of yourself as one. That is easier said than done. And the thing that helps you doing is practice, practice, practice. It is regularity. It is not so important that you dedicate 1 week or every 2 weeks 3 long hours and then have 3 weeks you do nothing. But better do 10 minutes, but do this every day. Even if there is hardship, even if you are troubled, even if God's no happens to come between you and your exercise, do your exercise and say, I take these 10 or 15 minutes, come what may be. That is the resolution. For if you go to your job, or return to your wife or husband, or stand before your children, then there is something. You cannot say, I take a break from being a father. Go look out for it yourself. If your children are crying and something happened, you as a father or mother, you cannot step away and say, oh, I don't care about this now. It demands it. Or if you are in the job, you cannot say, oh, today I don't feel like it. And you must take spirituality just as serious as that and say that is something I dedicate myself to, and it demands time. I take this as a requirement to make it real, to make it right. That difference, for instance, if you want to learn playing piano or drawing, if you do it wishy-washy, you will get wishy-washy results. It may be okay for you. I do not criticize you. I'm just saying. And it doesn't mean like if you want to play piano, maybe you have to learn 2 hours each day, because it's a difficult thing. It's not so with spirituality. Spirituality, on the other hand, when you begin it and do it a little while, has the tendency to come to you. Because the forces, the energies and the beings realize, okay, this person is interested. And you will realize there is a breaking point when the forces and the powers and the beings knock at your door by themselves. Like with a lesson, or in a dream, or in a vision. Or you will suddenly be overcome by the feeling, I will go to my sacred tree. I'd feel suddenly like I have to go there. Or you feel like, if you work with spirit animals, totem animals, like you feel something is around you calling you. And for that to happen, you have to dedicate yourself in a way that the forces around you know you are interested, and then they will reciprocate your interest. But if you do them that only wishy-washy every few weeks, they will not take you seriously. It's like if you, like in a personal relationship with a woman or man you love, if you call that person only every 3 weeks, that person will soon realize you're not really interested in me. So it requires dedication. Like demonstrating powers around me, I'm interested in learning something. So I'm trying to touch basics here. You see, we have 30 minutes and have not gotten into a single exercise. Now, the thing that I teach is compatible with every walk of life. Whatever, if you're a simple worker or a billionaire, or if you're a man or a woman, or if you define yourself as one of the new genders or sexual, it's absolutely irrelevant. You can be a Muslim, a Christian, a pagan, even an atheist, I said. You just have to practice these things and they cause certain results. I mean, if you belong to a very stringent religion, you may have difficulties, especially if you are following one of the 3 book religions. But you may adapt them into your life in ways that depends on you. That is a question that only you can answer. If you belong to a system that demands exclusivity, but that is what for you to decide. So let's go ahead. The first thing that you really need to learn is to let go your normal everyday thinking. It's like your emotions are, if you see, there is this image, if you want to have awareness and your mind is troubled, it is like a pond, like water that is agitated and you're not clear. You cannot see because a plethora of emotions troubles you. Fear, anxiety, of every possible things that may be happening in the future, or it troubles you what bad things happened in the past. And you have to let these both go, not by force, like pushing them aside. I know that the meditation of sitting down is not for everyone, but at the beginning it is the only thing that you must do, because I know I have developed meditation techniques that are based on movement, and I will teach them in a later lesson. But the first that is a basic rigorous sort of training. You have to get through this basic phase first. You have to make this sort of classic meditation, sit down, breathe, and get quiet. Now, that is not so much important what sort of seat you have. The important thing is that you stick to it, because it will feel uncomfortably physical. Like if you sit in a while, close your eyes, and then the first thing that you start is learn a controlled breathing rhythm. The classic one is the 4-fold breath, and it is the one that I recommend the most. It means you inhale 4 seconds, then you pause the breath 4 seconds, you exhale 4 seconds, and you pause again 4 seconds. If you start doing this, sitting upright, it's ideal to sit really upright, and do this, it will cost you at the first an enormous amount of energy. But it's the same like learning, as I said, sports or like self-defense like Kung Fu or Karate. If you do Kung Fu the first time in your life, you will be exhausted after moments because you are untrained. It's normal. So just sitting and ignoring your knee is itching, or you feel something in your left finger, or there will always be something. Suddenly your eyes feel dry. You have to learn to just sit, to overcome the disturbances of the body. And that is not fighting against it, because if you fight against it, you make it stronger. That is like these Jedi. The teaching is you shall not feel angry. The problem is if you cannot suppress emotions. They are there, and they have the right to be there. They are usually there for reasons. And if you try to push them violently out or wall them in by force, you just give them more food. It is like a river. That is the way of the yin, of passivity, of the water. You have to learn to let them go. There is no other way I can describe it. If you try it many times enough, you will come to a point where you feel that. But the first thing is practical. Sit upright. Take this meditation seat and make it your standard seat, which you always take. Do not change it often, because it is a physical memory that starts to be imprinted into your thinking, that I'm in this seat now, which activates this automated mindset. I'm now in a spiritual exercise. And the more the same the things you do, in a way, the easier it is to snap into this spiritual mindset. It's like snapping into a spiritual mindset. For instance, that happens, you can observe this probably if you are entering a church. Now, no matter what religions you belong to, if you are in the West, for example, at least as a Western person, I'm not certain if a person from the East or other areas of the world feel that way. But speaking to Westerners, if you enter a church, even if you're an atheist, if there is a wonderful cathedral with all the beauty, you are silent. You feel, you snap into a mindset. There is a small book recommendation. Let me fetch it quickly. No, it's a little bit theoretical, but if you find the time and maybe the money, it's not a bad book. It's called The Sacred and the Profane. The Sacred and the Profane, the Nature of Religion. Oh, the name of this author is so difficult to pronounce. I have no idea from where he or she, Mircea Eliade. I will probably just write it in the description of the video. It's not a must-have. But the gist of it is, the sacred and the profane is that you can change your mindset like, okay, this is a sacred moment, a sacred time, a sacred place. And the most that we feel this is sacred places. If you visit Stonehenge, okay, it's usually overcrowded with tourists, so it's difficult. But you visit some lesser known sacred places of ancient times, or if you say again a church, a temple, whatever it is, and you're not surrounded by too many tourists, you feel that you automatically snap a little bit at least into a different mindset, like, you know, this is a sacred place, it is not a profane place. And that is what you have to cultivate, the ability to willful snap into the mindset of sacredness out of profanity. And I do not mean profanity in the meaning of swear words. Like there is the profane world and there is the sacred world. Like this author phrase, this is, I would say, the spiritual world and the mundane world, which is more my wording. Profane sounds a little bit negative and sacred a little bit too holier than holy. So my terminology is the spiritual and the mundane. You step into a spiritual mindset. And there are many systems which help you to reaffirm this mindset. One of it is always take the same physical meditation seat. When you have this fourfold breath, don't experiment too much with others. You may try out others for a time, but after a short time say, okay, none is easier than the other. That's an illusion. Really, trust me on this. Now, the problem is the place. Almost all people will not have a temple or a room that they can dedicate and step into this room and be in a spiritual mindset, like you go into a church or you enter a stone circle or whatever. Or a sacred grove, like the Druids had. Of course, you can, if you are lucky, be living in an area where natural areas like forests or whatever are close. You may seek out a place which is not much frequented and make it a grove or a sacred place. If you are advanced, you can make any place a sacred place for you. If you have learned to blend this out, it's possible. You can take the crowded place in the biggest city. If you really train and focus it, it is possible to make a crowded place in, I don't know, in New York City a sanctum for you. So it's possible. I had the feeling of the sacred in one of the most crowded places here in Berlin. But it was not a wanton creation of a sacred place. It was just, it came over me. So I had this moment. But what you want as a beginner is a place which is usually shielded from incursion from other people. I have a sacred place which is not entirely, which there are always regularly a few people walk by in nature because there is no calm. I would have to walk way too far and I don't have a car. But I am advanced enough after 35 years to be able to blend that out. If you begin, you usually will be, for instance, you will feel ashamed, like you're sitting under a tree, or let's take Tai Chi. You know this slow movements. Now imagine yourself standing on a place and making those exercises. Of course people will stare, or people will ask, what the heck are you doing, or laugh at you. And it is very difficult to overcome this. It's possible, maybe as a faraway goal necessary, but for now you will want a place where you are largely undisturbed. And either you are lucky to be able to have nature which is within reach for you, or you will make it in your room. Now the problem with your room, which is what most people only have as opportunity, your room is an entirely profane, mundane place. You do all your everyday business in it. So it is extremely difficult to imagine your place suddenly as a sanctuary. Now there are rituals like drawing a circle and calling the 4 directions. Now again, it is absolutely irrelevant whether you believe there are the forces or the guardians of the 4 directions or not. That is not relevant. What you have is you have to awaken the inner child. You have to make yourself believe. You have to do as if. And then it is absolutely without any relevance whether these beings or energies exist. What is of relevance is that doing this will cause something in your mind that you want to achieve. Calmness, centeredness, and being anchored in yourself. That is the only thing that counts. That it does something. Of course, I believe those forces are real. But again, I say it's absolutely not a necessity. Especially at the beginning, you will have difficulty and think, are these real? And I say it's not relevant. It doesn't matter at all. Certain things will produce certain results. Now, for instance, that is one of the most popular, like drawing a circle. I will not explain this ritual now because I will not go into practice, but it is usually people starting in the East, go to the East. I will explain it in a very brief way, maybe if you're not familiar with it. You start in the East, and there are forces you identify in the East. If in the Western, it is the element of air. There is a Christian way, like the 4 archangels, for instance, or you can attribute 4 deities of pagan ways if you are pagan. And then there are 4 guardians of 4 a little bit different elements in the Chinese way, which I practice and which I teach, and that is which I will teach here, because I prefer for reasons which I will explain in another lesson, the teaching of the elements of China, the Daoist elements. They are personally, I think, a more advanced and more practical, more helpful theory of elements than the Western ones. But again, I will come to that in another time. And you begin in the East, and they usually go around clockwise because it symbolizes the positive growth. And then you turn to the South. In the West, that's the element of fire. It's also like the East is where the sun rises, the beginning of all things. And you move on to the South where the sun is on height, and that represents the height of power, the mid of day, and the summer solstice. And then you go to the West, which is usually the entrance to the dark realm. In Egypt, for instance, the West was a symbol, a word for the entry to the realm of the dead. When Reharachte, the sun god, in the west entered the realm of the dead in the evening. It's also the element of water in the Western way. I start today with the Western because they are now the ones you're more likely familiar with. Of reflection. It is the autumnal equinox, like the East is the spring equinox. The day where day and night are of the same length. And it's like two halves. You have the summer half and you have the winter half. The night and the day. And so the region from west over north, where north is midnight, the darkness, and winter solstice, and to the east you have the so to speak the darker side, not dark in the meaning of evil, mind you. And you have the light half of the circle. And that is you circumvent in a circle, like you may sprinkle water, for instance. Or you may hold incense, you know, that thing that smokes. And go into each direction and then say something that summons forces and ideas, whatever. Guard me and guide me. Give me your blessing, power of the East, whatever it is, to whatever pathway you walk. And you go from east to south to west to north, and then you complete the circle, and you may make a finalization. That is the basic idea. And in that way, you transform your normal living room, or whatever room you take, into a temple for a temporal time. Because in the lack of temples, as in the lack of sacred places, we do something that tells our mind, this is now not my living room, that is now a sacred space for the time being. And you do this again and again and again to ingrain in your mind a mindset like the mindsets I've described before. You habituate a way of thinking and feeling. And if you do these things often enough, creating a circle, meditating, breathing, calming, letting troubling emotions pass, not oppress them. Those are the early steps. You do this again and again. I say you do this daily. It doesn't have to be complex, elaborate, complicated. Just do this. 10 minutes. You can don't do it too much. I would say as a beginner, half an hour is top, because beyond that you will exhaust yourself. And this is not very helpful. It's not something that, it's not like, I had disciples when I was much younger who believed that every sitting down and doing nothing is meditation. And that is, of course, bollocks. It is an awareness. It is a certain activity. Even if you learn to let go, you will find in our world where we are so trained to actively do that, letting go is extremely strenuous for our Western mindset. More than you may believe now that you just listen to it. Calming down, letting go, is an extremely straining thing to do, even though it sounds paradox, it is. So you will find lots of papers about sitting in meditation, breathing, letting go, and creating circles. The circle training is like you make your profane, mundane living room for a temporal moment into a space which is sacred, which is not mundane. So you start with maybe a short mini meditation to start to get grounded for 2-3 minutes. You then do the circle in any form, And then you start the real meditation. 10 minutes, 15 minutes. That's somewhat what I would advise as a beginner. Depending on your need and desire, you can make this twice a day, in the morning or in the evening. For instance, if you're a working person with a regular working schedule, you may make this before you start your day in the morning, and you make it again in the evening as finish of your day. For instance, try to fit it in your life in a certain way. And also, if you are curious, read other sources, what other people do. Because the great problem, I know this from learning piano, the great problem is practice exercises have the danger to become boring. So allow yourself to try a little bit playful experimenting with things which you hear. Like you may hear suddenly about runes, then incorporate runes, experiment with that. That is why when I make my piano lessons, I do a certain amount of time, the duty, so to speak, what must be trained, the training exercise which is there, for like I say half an hour, and then for another 20 minutes I make free playing like how it just comes to my mind. Like I have a tune then in my mind which I experiment with. So that you are not just bound in duty and becomes like a chore. You may read about runes, or you may about something Celtic, about spirit animals, about anything, whatever comes to your mind and attracts you. And add that to the... you do need to keep the basic exercise for a while. Because the first thing that you have to learn is to change your mindset from the profane into the sacred, from the mundane into the spiritual. You have to start to believe and see yourself as an identity, as you are a spiritual person. As you assume of yourself to be others, a father, a working person, the son or daughter of your parents, whatever. You have a multitude of roles in your life which are a part of the multitude of your identities. And you have to add to establish that you believe of yourself, a part of my identity also is a spiritual person, one who walks a spiritual path. And that is established by regularity, by doing, by practicing. I think I do not want to make the lessons too long. I usually, when I make videos otherwise, they are considerably longer, but we are beyond minute 50. So I think I have explained the very basics now. And I will elaborate about this path in next lessons as soon as possible, but I take my time. So I hope this was intriguing and interesting enough. Not too boring, because I had to cover some very basic things, because some people may be unclear or have walked pathways and may not know about some of the basics. I have met such people often enough that they are very advanced in some parts, but they have not learned some of the basic things. So even if you've learned a lot, really contemplate what I've said here. And then, of course, if you're an absolute new person, you need to hear this, of course. So thanks for listening to me. Talking about the very, very, very basic things of what I call Daoist Druidry. I will elaborate more in the next lesson. Thanks for listening to me, and may your days be blessed, and may you find inner peace.